Permanent des langues officielles.
Welcome to meeting number 4 of the Official Languages Committee. The meeting is hybrid. For those participating virtually, please turn off your mic and mute yourselves if you are not speaking.
Non, avant de prendre la parole, tous les commentaires doivent être adressés.
All comments should be addressed to the chair. I would ask members to raise their hands if they wish to speak, whether you're in presence or virtually. I will address up a list, and before beginning, I'd like to advise the members of the committee that we have a few administrative issues to deal with a little bit later, and if everyone is in agreement, we will take a few minutes to settle those issues. Is that fine with everyone? Okay. In keeping with the motion adopted by the committee in September 2025, we are sitting today to continue the study on the continuum on French language education. I'd like to invite and welcome our witnesses. From the Association Locale des Enseignants et Enseignantes Francescois, Daniel Dion, President of this Association of Teachers of French Saskatoon, Fédération des Parents Francophones de Colombie-Britannique, Marie-André Asselin, Director General, Christian Leclerc, President, Network for the Development of Literacy and Competencies, Denis Danier, DG video conference. So welcome to all. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present, and then we will go to questions. I will begin with Mr. Zion. Mr. Zion, you have 5 minutes. Good day. Am I coming through loud and clear? My name is Daniel Zion. Our association is comprised of a number. It's the only French language federation with 2,300 witnesses. Pardon me, members. Now, before describing the situation, we're going to have to in September, 28 years ago, a decisive moment in my Francophone identity occurred to me at the age of 12. Founding and establishment of a Francophone school in a small village of Zenon Park finally enabled me to pursue my studies in my mother tongue in my community without compromise, a right that my brothers and sisters had not had a chance. After my high school and university career, the cycle was completed when I accepted a teaching position with the same school board, French, where I had been a student. After teaching 18 years, I've been called here to testify before you. My presence here today is a distinct result of the profound impact of Section 23 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms have had on me as a young Franco-Saskatois. Despite this process, there is still much work to be done to right the wrongs of the past and address the inequities and opportunities or unequal opportunities facing Francophone students today. In education, we work with people. Some have greater needs than others, and it's up to teachers to respond to these needs, often complex, with the tools and resources at hand. We've also affected by the shortage of teachers, currently affecting many French language school boards across Canada. This situation is particularly dire in rural school areas. Geographic isolation, cultural isolation, and professional isolation persists. As a result, it's a lack of alternatives. It's sometimes necessary to fill these teaching positions with members of the local community who do not hold a vocational teaching certificate. The teaching of learning outcomes requires that teachers have the necessary teaching resources to carry out their work. Unfortunately, the lack of resources developed for Saskatchewan curricula is a perpetual challenge that has existed since the inception of the Francescois schools. The small size of our school board limits the ability of publishers to invest in and sell resources to design for our curricula. The threshold of profitability is not attainable. Teachers must therefore adapt resources designed for curricula in other provinces and even other countries, a task that takes up a lot of energy. You can understand the frustration of a teacher who sees the panoply of resources developed and available for equivalent curricula in English. As with other school boards, the student population is not homogeneous. Many students come to our schools with learning challenges, social, emotional challenges, psychological challenges, language challenges, to name but a few. While these are not unique to French language schools, the tools and resources available to address them are few and far between. Limited access to specialized professions who work in French and offer psychological, occupational, or speech therapy services, to name but a few, lead to long delays before a student can even be assessed. Delays of up to 2 years in some cases, which significantly will delay the progress of the vulnerable student. It's also important to mention the infrastructure challenges we face. Many of our rural schools are old and in need of extensive repair, while some of our urban schools are overflowing with students. And finally, I'd like to highlight the perseverance of our students who are transforming their lives as students in spite of these difficulties. Thank you. We're still working on a few technical issues here. Now I'll ask our next witness to the Federation of Francophone Parents in British Columbia. We're having technical issues, so we're going to ask a substitute to read the presentation. Thank you very much. On behalf of the Federation of the Francophone Parents in BC, I'd like to thank you for inviting us to contribute to study the minority language education continuum. Our federation has been working on French language education issues since its creation in '79 and represents parents of 55,000 children who are entitled to receive their primary and secondary education in French here in BC. Our federation also operates child care centers. A strong ally of the Conseil francophone de la Colombie-Britannique, a French language school board, our organization was a co-plaintiff along with the CSF in the legal case that led to the victory in the Supreme Court in 2020. For more than 20 years, early childhood sector has established itself as an essential component of French language education. Access to such education in BC naturally requires a network of schools to provide French as a first language to children. But French language education must be understood in a broader sense. It starts in early childhood with daycare and continues through to post-secondary education. In fact, the entire continuum of minority language education should enjoy constitutional guarantees. Access to early childhood service in French is a fundamental issue for the validity and development and vitality of our French minority communities, particularly because they contribute to the transfer of language and culture to new generations. However, problems in early childhood sector remain problematic. For example, in terms of infrastructure, the demand for French language early childhood daycare services continues to exceed the supply of such services. According to the latest census, BC has approximately 4,000 children aged 4 and under whose first language is French. However, there's only about 450 spaces in preschools offering French language services. In vast majority of cases, parents have no choice but to place their children in English language daycares. This situation is a painful consequence on the low rate of French language transmission among children who have one French-speaking parent. To reverse this trend, We need long-term structural solutions. In terms of human resources, the effect of province-wide shortages of early childhood education are felt most acutely by the communities whose vitality depends on access to French language early childhood services. An action plan would, of course, call on additional investment in early childhood. We are very pleased that Employment and Social Development Canada recently allocated $47.7 million over 3 years to our plan to deploy a network of early childhood practitioners and to implement initiatives in official language minorities communities as the needs are urgent. Nevertheless, the impermanent nature of the federal structure for supporting minority language education and early childhood services in French, as well as a lack of concrete obligations in this regard, keep French-speaking minority communities in a perpetual state of uncertainty. What will we do in March 2028 when the action plan for official languages expires? Was our school system built without a structural or permanent financing commitment from the government? The current legislative framework has allowed early childhood education to be virtually excluded from the 2019-2018 roadmap. Legally, there's nothing to prevent a future government from returning to this situation with its next action plan. Despite the recognition of the special needs of Francophone minorities in agreements with provinces and territories under the National Child Care Program, our federation observes a lack of transparency, a lack of consultation, and the absence of effective accountability mechanisms. Worse still, there's nothing to prevent the future government from abandoning this language clause when the agreements are to be renewed. These are many challenges for French language early childhood education in BC. For French-speaking parents living west of the Rockies should not mean linguistic assimilation for their children. The country's linguistic duality must be extended and experienced on a daily basis from coast to coast, starting from birth. Thank you. I'd like to give the floor now to the Réseau de développement alphabétique des compétences. Well, I think I'll give the floor to our president. Oh, perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself so we know who you are. Yes, certainly. I'm the president of RESDEV. 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. And on behalf of our network for the development of literacy and skills, RESDAC, thank you for the invitation that you've invited us today. We'd like to contribute to your reflection on specifically 2 issues. First, the notion of education continuum is perhaps a limiting notion compared to that of lifelong learning. Secondly, what positive measures could be taken by the federal institutions to support a lifelong learning continuum? On this first question, the educational continuum, the new Official Languages Act states the federal government's commitment to, quote, enhance opportunities for English and French-speaking minority communities to acquire quality learning opportunities in formal, non-formal, or informal settings in their own language throughout their lives. The Act's perspective thus goes beyond the idea of continuum of education that would be solely responsible for formal diploma-awarding institutions such as schools, colleges, or universities. It now implies that the continuum also embraces the non-formal learning context. For example, when we develop skills in the workplace or in our associations or NGOs, as well as what we learn in informal context. For example, by reading, discussing, observing, playing, joining. We therefore recommend that the committee redefine the education continuum in terms of lifelong learning so as not to forget non-formal and informal learning contexts. learning contexts that are often neglected, though they contribute fundamentally to the vitality of our community. On the question of positive measures to support lifelong learning. Over the past 4 years, RESDAC, our network, and its partners in French-speaking communities have undertaken to define a new social project around the notion of learning, and we're gradually putting into place a major strategy to transform our communities into learning communities. To support the communities in these efforts, RESDAC is putting into place several tools. First of all, competencies for self-fulfillment reference framework that captures the specific needs of Franco minorities and individuals. The Franco Badges platform for digital micro-attention attestation of these skills. A labeling protocol for learning organizations and communities. Another platform, which referred to as PCFAD, for distance learning resources. A TOPO platform for geolocalized data on learning resources, artificial intelligence-assisted skill assessment platform, and a center of expertise to support these initiatives. We recommend that the committee encourage federal institutions to take positive measures of support for initiatives that meet the needs of our Francophone communities, such as supporting provincial and territorial summits, identifying community needs and aspirations at the local and regional level. Support the creation and facility of roundtables to orchestrate the implementation of learning developments, support training and skills development initiatives, support the implementation of Franco Badges platforms for the recognition of prior learning and skills, support unemployment and skills development training strategies assisted by AI. In a recent submission to the Department of Finance as part of its consultation, RESDAC noted that major federal measures to support skills development in tune of billions of dollars, but forgot or marginalized our Francophone minority communities. We therefore recommend that the committee request of Treasury Board Secretariat as part of a new regulations on Part 7 of the Act to name federal institutions that are specifically called upon to support the development of our Francophone minority community institutions that are specifically called upon to adopt positive measures, formal and informal. And in more general terms, we recommend that the committee encourage collaboration between the various levels of government, educational institutions, private sector, to create a viable learning ecosystem conducive to the development of Francophones in Canada. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Before proceeding to questions, I'd like to know if we could have a 1 or 2 minute stop, pause. We're having some technical difficulties with one of our...
encore une fois que ça n'a pas marché.
We're very sorry, Mr. Leclerc, that it doesn't work. It's not the speaker, it's the system that's flawed today. There are going to be rounds of questions, and we'll ask the questions of Madame Asselin. And if there are additions you'd like to add to her answers, you can do so in writing with the committee. Okay, question-answer period begins now with Mr. Goudin, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'm sorry I was late. I was at Parliament, and we changed rooms, so no one is responsible but myself. Mr. Dion, first of all, my question, but I thank the other organizations for being present. Mr. Dion, I'd like you to share the situation in Saskatchewan. Now, from what I've read, the situation of francophones, Francescois, is okay, but you need supplementary support, tools, and ease of access. You said for those, there were 4,000 children under the age of 4, but only 450 spaces. Is that normal, or how does that compare with general daycare? It's not the lack of young candidates, it's just not enough space. Yes. Yes. I know I ran through that very fast in my presentation. But we have 12,000 students that potentially should be our clients for the Francophone schools in Saskatchewan from kindergarten onwards. Now, there's only 2,500 spaces. We have areas where there are quite extensive Francophone communities, but no access to the schools.
The problem, is it that the infrastructures are not accessible enough and young people are discouraged because they have to take school transportation to get to school, and they are discouraged, and as a result, they register in the English school boards? Answer, we have the two issues: accessibility to a physical school, communities that live hundreds of kilometers from the closest French school. So it's not reasonable for children to travel 4 or 5 hours every day to go to school. But in some regions, like in the urban regions like Regina and Saskatoon, considering that we do have schools, but they are not necessarily located at the center of town, some children decide to go study in the majority system. So there's accessibility, transportation, and the distance. Thank you, Mr. Dion. A very quick question. After that, I'll turn to the other organizations. Let's say in the morning you become a lawmaker. You have one recommendation to make, which is the top priority that should be implemented as quickly as possible. We all agree that there's a lot to be done to improve the situation, but if you were to pick one thing to prioritize, what will that be? Answer, I think we should prioritize access to education for children who deserve it and who need it, the rights holders. Thank you. Now, let me turn to Madame Marie-Andre from British Columbia. You represent an organization that worked very hard in the past. You fought hard for official languages. You fought for the rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to be respected. A while ago, as I mentioned before, you said 4,000 children 4 years and below are available for daycare, but you don't have enough seats. We know that a lot needs to be done to meet the needs of all citizens, and there are children who are entitled to education, preschool education in French, are available. Now, looking at the education continuum, I understand that it's important for us to talk to our young people, for them to use the entire continuum. Now, at what age should children be part of the education continuum, from early childhood education to secondary? Well, when we talk about early childhood education, we talk about the entire cycle of life of the child. Usually, children go to daycare from 12 months after parental leave. So from 6 months to 12 months when they go to daycare till they go to nursery school or primary school at 5 years, and that's early childhood education. So what we are advocating for is a stable funding structure so that we can administer all daycare programs for children below 5 years old, but also daycare educators that should be taken into account. So daycares before school and after school. For the system to be sustainable, we need to take everything into account: daycares, early childhood, and daycares before and after school. Very quickly, because I'm running out of time, what is important for you is predictability. You want stable and predictable funding. Very quickly, to start a daycare center, it takes 2 to 3 years. If the funding for the plan of action for official languages ends in 2028, what happens? It takes teams to come up with the programs, work with school boards to develop these assets. So what happens to the projects that we want to kick off in the next few years? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Now the floor goes to Mr. Deschênes-Thériault. You have 6 minutes. Thank you for your interventions. We know that French language education is a key to the vitality of Francophone communities outside Quebec, throughout Canada. Now, in British Columbia, 44% of rights holders are entitled to French language education who have never gone to French language schools throughout their education. In Saskatchewan, it's 40%, whereas elsewhere it's only 35%. Why do we have this lower proportion of rights holders actually going to French language schools in Saskatchewan and British Columbia? First, Mr. John and Mr. Asselin. In Saskatchewan, one of the challenges is geographic distribution and the size of the communities. Furthermore, we have to be honest. To build a school, we need to be funded to be able to do that. So these are processes that are long and laborious. To set up a school, these are long processes requiring a lot of effort and energy. Luckily, during the last census, we were able to get good data on the distribution of Francophone communities in Saskatchewan. So we hope that this will give us good information to help us plan for the future. Thank you, Madam Asselin. Yes, the geographic disparity of Francophones on the territory is clearly one of the issues. There are many communities with Francophones without Francophone schools. So these plans are being made over several years. So there's also the lack of predictability when it comes to the funding we could obtain to build schools. Schools are very small, lack of spots in daycare centers. Usually Francophone daycare centers are attached to the Francophone schools. So if we don't have enough daycare centers or no daycare centers, this prevents many children from getting educated or learning French before they get to school and doing the transition. So if there are no spots in daycare centers, what happens? They go to English daycare centers. Very often, children have to make a choice to send their children to English schools, and then this leads to assimilation for those children. Thank you very much. In the minority context, we know that children play a double role. education and supporting the linguistic and cultural vitality of communities. When we look at federal funding, funding is provided to help communities. But now, in your respective provincial governments in Saskatchewan and British Columbia, this dual mandate for Francophone schools, is it taken into account when resources are allocated? Mr. Dion, to my knowledge, not very much. Very little consideration is given to that. We could say that in the provinces, education is not considered an investment, but rather an expenditure. It is really expenditure is given to pedagogy. They don't take into account the cultural mandate and the identity mandate of our school boards. Thank you. Now, Madam Asselin, in British Columbia, there were lots of lawsuits. You fought against the province in court. You won a case at the Supreme Court against the province. Have you seen any changes on the ground since then? We've seen some changes. Announcements were made to purchase land or build schools after the Supreme Court ruling. Conversely, the process is very slow. Lots of communities are still facing dire problems. They have not yet been served with the structures. At the level of the provincial government, yes, some funding has been received to support French language education, but all funding structures, funding schools in other ways, for example, funding for real estate is provided equally, is the same structure for Anglophones and Francophones. There's no recognition of the specificity of the needs of Francophones. Thank you. Very quickly to end, the federal government has agreements with provinces. The British Columbia government, is it consulting Francophone organizations during discussions to introduce these education agreements? Madam Asselin first, and then Mr. Dion. Yes, we had consultations. I can't speak on behalf of the school board, but the discussions took place with the provincial government and the school board. But it's very long, and the needs of Francophone parents are not taken into account, not heard enough to lead to change. We don't see an impact in the lives of our Francophone communities yet, because parents want to see an impact in the lives of our children now. Children are growing up fast, and there's great assimilation in British Columbia, so we need to act fast to avoid an entire generation of Francophones to be assimilated. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Beaulieu, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you to our witnesses. Now, in Quebec, it's unbelievable. I was looking at the chronology of events. For example, in British Columbia, I'm being told that in 1997, the British Columbia government gave Francophones the right to teach French. Madam Asselin, what was the situation at that time before 1977? That's a good question. I was not in British Columbia at the time. I know that there was no Francophone school board, so there was no school management. And the French framework program was administered by the Anglophone school district, so it was very difficult to have a good quality of education for our children. So it was also not something that was offered to all Francophone communities in the province. That's all I can say. So in 1977, it was already 7 years since the Official Languages Act had been adopted. Subsequently, you were obliged to take legal action, as my colleague mentioned. For example, we are told that in 1983, there was the first public Francophone school that was opened in Vancouver. Could you give us more information about that? You said that before there was no Francophone school, no public Francophone school. Yes, there was a framework program in French. It was not even a school. a few classrooms inside an Anglophone school managed by the English school board of the area. So it wasn't really quality education. I remember hearing people, hearing the Federation, those who were there before, the Federation of Parents, they were the ones developing the curricula alongside the teachers. They also developed pedagogic material because it was very difficult for the Anglophone English district to develop the material and to support their teachers. So it was a Francophone community that organized itself to ensure quality education, but it had nothing to do with what we have now. And now in 1983, the Federation came up with a first case against the British government. After that, there were lots of legal processes. Now, the British Columbia government had no political will to ensure the future of Francophone communities. What happened? Was it very slow? After the legal cases, you were able to obtain more schools, or at some point was there an obstacle? Yeah, if there had been no legal action taken by the Association of Francophone Parents and the Federation of Francophone Parents, who've neither had school management or school management, because there was legal action to set up the school boards and management throughout the territory of British Columbia. So legal action had to be taken over a long time by parents. And at that time, from what I have learned, I wasn't yet there at the Federation, but from what I've learned, these were very difficult fights, and the province at the time wasn't willing to set up a Francophone education system. Before 1995, it was very difficult to follow the funding system, but a study was carried out by the Federation of Francophone Parents to find out where the money had gone. And it was seen that from 1970 to 1988, from the very beginning, whereas there was no funding for Francophones, there was assimilation. Over the $5 million that was provided by the federal government to support official languages, 62% was allocated to the Anglophones in Quebec to the immersion programs in English Canada. So what do you think about this situation? That is what I also heard. At the time, I was not at the Federation, of course, but from what I've heard, it is very difficult to monitor the funding that was provided for Francophones. It was administered by the Anglophone school boards. There were not lots of accountability mechanisms in place. So Francophone communities were left with what was left, whereas we needed the money more. So the money did not really get into the hands of Francophones. It's very surprising, whereas in Quebec, Anglophone schools were overfunded, whereas at the beginning of a lot of the money went to the Anglophone schools and in immersion programs. Well, you recorded a victory in 2011. You seem to have had lots of difficulty having the ruling implemented. In June, you had to appeal another ruling. What do you think about this resistance? Even today, in 2025, you have to continue through legal action. Madam Asselin, you have 25 seconds left, so quick answer, please. The Federation of Parents is still fighting in 2025 for us to enjoy our rights. Did I understand? Was the question for Mario? Was the question for someone else? Was I mistaken? The gentleman may answer, or I could ask him a question during my next turn. I'm sorry. That's okay. Now I'll give the floor to Mr. Dalton for 5 minutes. Good morning. Thanks, witnesses, for coming today. The Francophone parents Are they aware of the education rights their kids are entitled to? What are you doing to contact them when they arrive in the province and before they get to primary school? Maybe Mr. Dion first and Madame Marcelin. I am not sure what is being done to contact Francophone parents administratively speaking. The Francophone community in Saskatchewan is a relatively small community. People know themselves well enough and they speak. The right to French language education is a well-known right within the community. It's not a question. Now, let's come back to the last question. It's rare in Saskatchewan to open a Francophone school without starting with a class action suit against the province. That's why many Francophones are not served. It takes a lot of will, a lot of time and energy to start the process to get a school for our community. Madame Marcel.
Notre réseau de membres compte.
Our network of members includes all association of parents and all preschool centers that are managed by the parents. So we are very connected with the early childhood centers in British Columbia, and that is how we can contact parents before the children get to school age.
With the high rate of migration into the province and other countries and join the ranks of our Francophones, I think the awareness of the parents and the Francophones who are coming through BC, the new arrivals, are less aware perhaps of the situation and the extra challenge faced by Francophone parents. So all organizations who are language-based culturally work in concert with our school boards so that they insist that their children be sent to French language schools, French language daycares, French language support services, not only childcare, not only schools, but other cultural institutions. We have to ensure the vitality of our culture and our language. Thank you, Madame Asselin. Perhaps you might speak to us of the impact of immigration generally on the number of students, first of all. And we were given a chart here. I don't see a very large increase in the student population in French language schools over the last 30 years. Did I misunderstand the numbers, or? Well, your last question, as to the French language school board, there were 300 positions created, and we even saw a lack of that, a reduction in the last few years. All Francophone school boards in BC and Saskatchewan are living with the same phenomenon in the French language boards. Now, the impact of immigration compared to the Francophone community or within the community, our French language community is growing. It's, in fact, in full bloom right now with the immigration, in part. British Columbia, in general, has had an increase also in the immigrant population, and it is reflected proportionately in the Francophone communities. Have you observed any decline when students go to elementary school in French and can continue to do their high school as well, or do they have to change to another school? I'm sorry, but the time is up, so make sure it's a short answer. Well, it's always a challenge. It's always a challenge. when it's a new school, for example, and it encompasses laboratories for science, a nice gymnasium, we see that there are fewer there's less exodus of Francophone students to English-speaking schools. Thank you, Monsieur Villeneuve. Thank you, Chair. My chair is addressed to the network there, the réseau. You're there to develop skills as well as education in general. Can you speak to us as to the scope and scale of the services and programs that you offer? Oh, I'm sorry, I addressed that to the wrong person, if you will. No, Mr. Beaulieu, I just addressed it to the wrong witness. Sorry. But you're so experienced, you set me straight. Thank you. Well, the RESDAC, of course, is a network. It's for the development of literacy and skills. It's a national organization. It covers all of Canada. We have units throughout the provinces. And are there specific needs in specific geolocations? Well, yes, we meet that a lot. There's a PICA, there's the International Measurement Scale, if you will, and in 2012 we wanted to have a Francophone sample to submit and to compare, of course, the levels among various populations and subsectors of the population. But we haven't had another request for such a sample since then, not in 2024, for example. But they didn't ask us for the sample. Now we compare needs in certain regions only, but we don't have complete or adequate data to try to identify more clearly the needs and to make... Thank you. Well, I was also wondering if there were certain needs in Canada in other areas which are not being met. Well, yes, yes. There's a need, I believe, in every region in Canada. This is the very vocation and mission of our network, is to make sure that we can help people try to access. Perhaps I think my director would like to add to that question. I'd like to mention how the needs of the Francophonie in Canada, and those in minority situations, are enormous. In 2012, it was 22% below the standards for the international literacy scales. Now, in some areas, it's more than 70% that fail to meet the basic level 3 or level 4 of the scale. Now, these individuals are doing all they can to try to reach out to the needs of Francophones in all the territories and provinces who are in a minority situation. And we're only talking about literacy in this case here. When we take a look at the full skill spectrum, when we compare ourselves to the majority, millions, if not billions, invested. And this is almost economic. We lost you a little bit. Could you come back, take a little more time, a few more seconds? I'll adjust my clock here. Monsieur Desgagnés? Yes, yes. We lost you. The sound was cut off, bandwidth or something. Could you give us, please, repeat your answer? Well, I was saying, the totality of skills to, in fact, live well in Canada. The government has been spending billions of dollars on various geolocation points and communities, and we have to find our way to cooperate. It's as if the community, the village, wasn't there. That's good. Thank you very much. Monsieur Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes. Yes, I'd like to follow up on Mr. Dion's question. I think it's the Association of Teachers. Now, you said that before 1995, what was the situation? Well, before we had access to the administration of our school boards, we had immersion schools or immersion services in some schools, but they're not considered schools. They're considered designated schools. So these so-called designated were designated by the Minister of Education. Special authorization had to be granted to a certain percentage of francophones or numbers. 10%, I think, was the cap, if you will. If you wanted French in the school, the community had to ask the school board officials, which would channel that to their department or ministry. And you still say there's a huge shortage of French language schools. The situation has improved, but it's far from adequate. Now, one concept is to advance the financing of immersion schools or units in Canada rather than actually deal in a comprehensive fashion to Francophone educational needs. Yes, that's correct. One of the challenges in distributing this money between Anglophone schools and immersion establishments, it's taking the path of least effort, I think. The structures are there. Now, a lot of these immersion institutions within our institutions are part of the school board of the majority population. And of course, that school board has 100 years of past experience to build their curricula, to build their infrastructure, to build the whole works. And they often have a superabundance of resources. We can't offer this entire range. We can't deal with special programs, for example. We don't have the numbers. We don't have the number of students. And they can also follow these in French, in English rather, but we can't offer them in Spanish. Monsieur Bélanger, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Dion, you're talking about geographic challenges, and I suppose it's the same in most separate locations in Canada. What minimum number is a community supposed to attain before getting access to French language education? Well, according to what Article 23 of the Constitution, the Charter of Rights, I believe that if there's one child that needs access to it would be sufficient. But obviously, economically, that's impossible to do that. So we can't create a school for one individual. It's ambiguous, it's vague in its wording, but perhaps rightly so, but we have to recognize the fact, though, that these children they're human beings with a human value for a community. We have some communities that are very well served, but I hate giving you a specific number, a minimum, maximum type of number, because all children merit education in their maternal tongue. Okay, perhaps Madame Asselin, the continuum of education in the language of the minority is a joint responsibility, federal, provincial, and demands and requires consultation with the communities. Do you believe that the government is transparent in this process? Well, to be honest with you, I'm hesitant because it's not really part of my mandate to assure the transparency of government. I leave that to the school board or their spokespersons to justify how they distribute the funds. I mean, that's not really my role. Madame Asselin, would you like to add something? Well, yes, there did occur consultations. As to transparency, well, different. That's not necessarily the issue. The issue is to have stable funding, adequate funding for the situation. Okay. Now, childcare services are of interest to me. You said there were, what, 4,000 children that need to be accommodated and only 450 places? Is that due, what, lack of manpower, lack of space, lack of density of population? Well, the major challenge, of course, is the lacking infrastructure. We had to, take the province to court to get our Francophone schools. What we would like and what we need is a school that would be ample enough to include a child care center in order to give access to the whole Francophone population. I know I'm repeating myself a bit here, but stable, structured, long-term funding that would allow us to plan accordingly. It takes a long time to develop an infrastructure plan or an infrastructure itself, and to develop childcare spaces which are adapted to a teaching environment, and to have the proper tools and educational programs to do so for the entire range of ages. And how can we do that if we're not sure where the next dollar is coming from next year? That's good. Thank you. Ms. Mingali. Thank you very much. I'd like to address my question to Mr. Dion. This continuum for education in early childhood through to secondary depends on committed and devoted, trained professional teaching staff. What are you doing to ensure that you continue to build strength in the system? Well, the only Francophone teaching establishment is at the University of Regina, Teachers College, if you will, offering 4 courses in French. I'm a graduate of that program myself. And I have one member of our council who actually is teaching at that particular program at the University of Regina. It's a very good program. Because, I mean, teaching is a craft, it's a profession, and it's not the facility that we often can have, especially if you are in a minority language situation. Well, we work in concert with the university, of course. We contribute as much support as we can to those French language, because we have to assure the coming generations. We've also heard about the difficulty in recruiting and retaining teachers in French language, speaking teachers in these minority situations. And what's the situation in Saskatchewan? One of the major challenges, of course, is the rural schools, the rural areas. Suppose you have a school which has 60 or 70 students in a small place and 5 teachers, let's say. Unless somebody is wanting to live in a small rural community, which is not usually the case, is to find people that are there to do that. Now, what happens generally is we take someone from the community, we offer them an opportunity to go and get some training, university, professionalization, and now, you know, in Ontario, if I want to be a teacher, I can be a teacher. And if my wife wants to be an agrologist, she can be an agrologist. But in these smaller communities in Saskatchewan, what occurs is that we'll advertise a vacancy, and we can't compete. We can't compete with the large municipal centers. So we have vacant positions in almost all of our schools, and other teachers, of course, have to pick up the load. So their workload is increased.
Now, I would like to talk to Mr. Degania and Mr. Kriski. Your organization also works on skills development in the workplace. Could you give us examples of fruitful partnerships with the province or the private sector? With the province, it's very difficult to work directly with them. Le Réseau was never consulted in connection with the transfer of funds, in spite of the fact that we made multiple requests. We are hoping for tools with organizations from Europe and Australia who are introducing platforms to help Francophones and Acadians to perfect their skills. So we're trying to identify needs, recognize the needs, and identify them so that we can have a better impact on the workplace. We have several partnerships with the Federation of the Chamber of Commerce of Quebec, university organizations working in research, and so on, to be able to place Francophones with employers, be they Anglophones or Francophones. I'm sorry, your time has run out. Thank you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, we really do appreciate the testimonies from our witnesses. We want to hear what they have to say, but as you know, we had some technical issues with Mr. Leclerc's sound. Our collaborators worked hard to try to correct the issue. If you allow me, I will take a 1-minute suspension to try to connect with him to resolve the issue. Suspension. We shall resume our meeting. We will continue with questions from MPs. I will now give the floor to Mr. Gill. You have 5 minutes.
I have a question for Mr. Dion. Currently, about 4% of immigrants to Western provinces are French speakers. But the Prime Minister has promised to increase that number to 12% by 2029. How are the education system in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan preparing to adapt to this potential rise in French-speaking newcomers? Have provincial school boards begun planning for an increase in demand for French language programs, teachers, and early childhood education spaces? Thank you.
Alors, l'augmentation de la population étudiante.
The increase in the student population in Francophone schools is rising because of immigration. We have several students coming from other countries who are rights holders and who have been there for 10, 15 years in our board. There's an influx that will come to Saskatchewan to settle, and the student population of Francophone right holders will increase because of immigration. Honestly, if these rights holders settle in a community that is not served by a Francophone school, we will not be able to reach them. Furthermore, we must bear in mind the fact that some of these immigrants who are coming to settle, the newcomers, will decide to put their children in Anglophone schools because they want their children to adapt to the language of the majority because of the lack of the other schools. But let's be careful when we interpret the data. If there's a 12% increase throughout the country, the 12% will not be reflected because we do not cover the entire province in our offer as a school board, in our offering as a school board.
I have another question. Do you believe there is enough collaboration between the federal governments, provincial governments, and community organizations to ensure that French-speaking families can integrate successfully into local education system? What specific support would you like to see from the federal government to help Western provinces meet this 12% Francophone immigration target while maintaining high-quality French language education?
Plus de collaboration, more collaboration between all levels of government can always benefit the relationships between all organizations that work towards minority language rights. And let's not forget that collaboration is one thing, but clear and sustainable financing of such programs is really important. And I think it's important that we keep collaborating and then we collaborate even more. We have organizations that seem to work in silos, and we need to make sure that the information is passed between organizations, and not only that information is passed, but that organizations listen to each other. And I think that's really important. J'aimerais souligner que
I would like to underscore the fact that it's beautiful to consult, and I can tell you that I consult people, but we need to listen and act on those consultations. That's very important.
Okay. My next question to Mr. Digane. I believe you last appeared before this committee in February of 2024. Since then, what kind of development have taken place with regard to your organization's relationship with the federal government? Has federal support for literacy and skill development among Francophone communities improved, stayed the same, or declined over the past year and a half? Thank you.
And Mr. Gill, there's about 30 seconds remaining.
Yeah. That question was from Mr. Digane.
Yeah. OK, donc depuis notre dernière représentation.
Since our last representation, the situation has stayed the same in spite of the enthusiasm of the network to play an active role in skills development, be it formal or informal. The situation is the same, so it's the status quo. So we have backpedaled. That's the way I see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Merci, Monsieur Gill. Je passe.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Madame Ginette, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. My question goes to Mr. Dion and Madame Asselin. When I look at your explanations of the challenges comparing immersion schools and Francophone schools, and I understand the challenges that you've been explaining since morning about obtaining access to schools for Francophone communities, is it logical? And of course, this would involve a change at the level of the school boards, because I understand that usually the majority wins. But if we were to change how the school boards are managed, could we have mixed schools? So in the same school, we have French infrastructure and Anglophone infrastructure providing the services that you are talking about. Is this an option that you could consider? And what will be the challenges to get there? Well, mixed services in the same building. You should understand that in a minority context, the majority will always win. Offering 2 services in the same building, well, you must understand that is the language of the minority that will win. So it will be difficult to offer French language quality education in a mixed environment, particularly because compromise could be made. Take my example. When I was young, the immersion school in my village had a gymnasium built for the Francophone community through funds received from Heritage Canada. I was a student in the Francophone school. My access to the gym was limited because I was not part of the majority board. So I had to there was legal action taken, and then I was allowed to get into the gym. Later on, a school was built in my village, and the gym and science lab were shared by these 2 schools. But we had separate, distinct buildings, even though we shared some of the infrastructure. Madame Asselin, we would not like to share spaces that way. It may look like a good idea, looking at structures and funding, but First of all, the needs of the two groups are totally different. I agree with Mr. Dion that Anglicization of our children happens when Francophone children and immersion students are placed together. English will dominate. Even in our Francophone communities and Francophone schools, we have to make sure that our children speak French in the corridors and during breaks. So if you put all those children with English dominating, it's going to be even more difficult to have a Francophone environment in our schools. With the schools, we want to create a feeling of belonging. It would be more difficult to create that feeling if the two communities are brought together. What we've seen in some secondary schools here in British Columbia, heterogeneous schools, French secondary schools inside an Anglophone school, sharing of spaces is very unequal, and very often Francophone students don't have equal access to like the libraries, to gyms, so the sharing of spaces is very difficult. So this is not what we desire. You have about 30 seconds left. Now, my question for Mr. Krajewski. You have talked about formal and informal influence. What does it mean working that way when you are talking about collaboration between the federal and provincial governments? What can be done? Quick answer. I think we need to think about Francophones when we think about support, particularly within the communities. We should look into what is formal and informal, because lots of federal transfers are not going to the formal sector. Those areas are being forgotten. Thank you very much, Madam Jeanette. Now I give the floor to Mr. Beaulieu, 2.5 minutes. Perfect. REDSAC, do you receive funding to support French language teaching? Does the federal government provide you funds since you are not on a specific territory? Maybe Denny will try to answer. We receive funding from Employment and Social Development Canada following a complaint we lodged with official languages. We received funding. The first year was $7 million that went to the entire network, to all members in the entire province and territory. This year, according to the last agreement, was $6 million over 4 years. For example, similar organizations will receive $100 million a year for skills development, $600 million for futures, and I could continue giving you similar figures. Many organizations from the majority group receive resources to help them throughout their life cycles to ensure that people have a chance to succeed. My colleagues, Madame Asselin, said it takes a village. RESDAC and its members and partners, be it the Federation of Young People, the Federation of Parents, must also train volunteers and employees. So not forgetting businesses and even universities and colleges. They have to organize internships. Some of the internships are paid for. We don't have the resources to do that. A question that goes to my two colleagues from British Columbia and Saskatchewan. A while ago, we talked about budgets that are increasing for immersion schools, constantly increasing, whereas the percentage for bilingualism for Anglophones outside Quebec has stayed the same at 9%. What do you have to say about the bilingualism rate for Anglophones outside Quebec? Please, maybe you put your question to one witness. Can one witness answer that question quickly? I may answer. I think the first thing to realize is that it's not a mandate of Francophone schools to train bilingual people. Their mandate is to train Francophones. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Godin, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ma première question va s'adresser.
My first question will be addressed to RESDAC. You said in your opening comments that you were recommending that learning be lifelong learning. Now we're looking at the continuum of education from early childhood to end of high school. Now, would you like to include further into university, colleges, etc.? Yes, of course. We're talking about the continuum in education. Well, one doesn't stop at high school. So post-secondary would be included as well. Adult education also for dropouts who are returning to school, for example, isn't covered at all. And I think that it should be also needs a recognition of informal or non-formal opportunities to learn as well. Well, you know, this is a legacy of one of your predecessors of formal, informal, and non-formal. I think we kind of have to set limits at a certain point. I don't know if this is the forum. Well, we could extend education to an adult age, if you will. But there might be subsequent reports or examinations of that because it's a very difficult situation. Now, I'm going to address my next question to Mr. Dion and Madame Lasselin. This study started in the 44th Parliament, and now we're in the 45th. And I know that there's been serious action going on in BC in particular. How is it that why do you spend so much time in defending your rights rather than advancing your rights? I understand your situation, but what can we do to help you so that you can concentrate and focus your efforts on the mission of education itself? Monsieur Dion, well, we have to develop the mechanisms of redundancy, if you will, whereby when funding is offered to the province, that those funds are actually going in a proportionate way to the minority community, language community. And we have to continue to protect the funding, which means we have to continue often bringing things before the courts. And it's up to the province also to insist on a better funding. Well, let's complete that, and then, Madame Asselin. If there are federal measures well-defined, no argument, and it goes directly to the Francophone boards, your need to challenge in court wouldn't occur. I mean, it should be done directly with the school board or the Francophone community. I agree with you in theory, but I'd like to eliminate that particular thing. We could use the money directly, yes, but in the current context, the challenge is that education is a provincial, in provincial jurisdiction. So often we have to struggle to get our rights respected. Madame Asselin, your point of view. Well, for daycare, for example, where it's a mixed jurisdiction, there should be consultation with the community itself in order to develop what the needs are to begin with. Well, thank you. Quick question for both of you. Has the modernization of the Official Languages Act sufficient to deal with that issue? 15 seconds or so. It's hard to know. You know, we can't really have a conclusion on that. You're a little bit shy. You don't want to really state your position? Okay. Monsieur Deschênes, Thériault, for the next and last round. We know that with the change of governments, there might be a change in priorities. Since 1995, early childhood education and child care has become an issue. And we saw an increase in the resources given for early childhood education and care. Now, in 2013, of course, it was under the radar. It wasn't really part of the policy package. Now, that's the neglected part, if you will. What could the federal government do to protect this advance that had been made in early childhood education? Well, the way that the funding is structured, I believe, when we talk about a shortage of access to education in French language, we would like to ensure that we start early, because that's where you have to start. And also, we have to know how to train your teachers. Early childhood education is slightly different than standard school education. If we recognize the need for the funding, training, we're very pleased with the 47% that we got, but what's going to happen with the programs that have to be supplementary or complementary to this educational cycle? What are we going to do after 2028 when this period is over? Will it be renewed? We don't want to lose the momentum that we have managed to achieve. Three-year agreements are not adequate, insufficient. Generally, it's 5 years, but now we're in our third year, and this is when we have finally have access to the financing. Had we had our share from year one, we would have 5 years to implement our programs, but would have had a better impact and a better result. Okay, on a different issue. This desire of the current federal government to increase Francophone immigration from its current to 12%. How will this be of assistance to you? How could it contribute to your attempts to get your share? Well, immigration is very important to us in BC. We can't actually fill all the positions for teaching and or even for classroom space. We have to hire from outside of the province. Foreign qualifications or other qualifications of a different province vary, as you know, and we have to make sure that they are compatible and equivalent. If somebody wants to move into one of our provinces, Saskatchewan or British Columbia, it's pretty difficult, and it's quite an arduous process to get recognized for your qualifications. So we have to pre-plan their arrival. Thank you. Mr. Dion? Well, in Saskatchewan, the same situation as what Mrs. Asselin has just described. We're very grateful for the fact that we are getting more staff, more teachers. We hope very much that they will qualify. But one of the challenges is to get over the hurdle of equivalency of qualifications. So we have to make sure that it's a smooth transition, seamless for the minority language community. It's rather subtle, perhaps, but it has its own distinct characteristics, and it can be a veritable shock to come to Saskatchewan and have to teach in a minority language situation rather than a majority situation, whether it's French or English. And of course, we don't have only teachers coming in, we have students coming in as well. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chantario. And with that, we will close our panel sitting today. I want to thank all the witnesses, Dion, Mr. Kaveski, Madame Degagné, Mr. Collecker, Madame Aslan. The committee is going to deal with two administrative issues, so we will dismiss the witnesses for now, and we thank you for your testimony. Thank you. It's been very useful. Colleagues, I'd like to draw your attention to two quick points. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we're going to take some time to discuss these two items now. 4 budgets have been distributed to that on the continuum of education, the contract for simultaneous interpreters, parliamentary, Treasury Board submissions, and we would like to invite also the Minister of Culture, etc. Shall we adopt the motions? Well, could you tell us what the... I point out that it's a minimum amount of money we're talking about, I think. Well, yes. Now, for the Treasury Board submission, it's one meeting, so it's $500. And the minister responsible for official language is the same thing. It's just a one-time appearance. And the renewal of the, we did that last Wednesday for the interpretation services, $2,500 to cover the travel of our witnesses, and the budget on the consultation is the largest of the 4 budgets, $41,900, which will cover travel for witnesses, which come from all corners of the country, Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton, Iqaluit, Montreal, Toronto, Winnipeg, based on the witness list that we were provided, and 10 working meals. There are 6 meetings, I believe, for the meeting, and we will have to discuss a report eventually, and we have to provide enough funding to conduct those activities. Well, what are the choices here? I mean, we have to undertake these studies, I'm sure. Is it, in your estimate, well, there are no options. We set six meetings, right? So it's just a formality in a sense. Well, good point, but this is why everything is based on where the witnesses are coming from. And it's in fact, an estimate of what the costs are. But Iqaluit, for example, we have Nunavut, which will provide a witness, and they'll come in person rather than by video. So they're fixed amounts. The House of Commons determines how much the average is for travel from Vancouver. It's X number of dollars, and that's what we put in the budget in there. So that like you say, not too many options. Well, in past years, was there not a comprehensive budget? I mean, look, we've got it down to one meeting at a time here. And if there are witnesses who prefer to appear on a Zoom meeting rather than travel, the budget would be less. Well, video or in person, it's impossible to decide who will come or who will choose to come in person or not. But we take a certain number and we try to accommodate both categories of appearances. For each study, we have to develop a budget and offer it to the authorities, of course. So this is our attempt to do that and satisfy that procedural point. Well, if we have more witnesses who wish to appear in person, well, we have to try to get a supplementary budget, or have you had conversations to see if they want to come here? And what's the cost of those famous headsets? Well, one headrest, $250 in general. It can be less. It can be less. We give them a list of what is standard recommendation, adequate sound, etc. And one headset per if they're due. Now how it is spent actually depends as to the variables that we've just mentioned. It costs a bit more to have somebody come to Ottawa rather than pay for a headset and have them on a Zoom meeting. So if we don't spend all the money, whatever's left over comes back to the committee. So we maintain that control. So we'd rather estimate a higher number than to go back for a supplementary budget, because that's very difficult to do. And if it's not unspent money, it goes back in the committee's budget envelope. These headsets, they could purchase it themselves because they have the specifications of the recommended headset. We had a problem this morning, and it wasn't really a headset problem, but it might have been. They reimburse for the cost. Yes, there's a very strict list as to what is an adequate headset. And we can tell here electronically if they're wearing one of the recommended or mandatory, if you will, one of the headsets. If we can see if it is on the list or not from here. Well, excuse my ignorance, but we had a lot of people on video today. We don't impose that. We invite the witness, and they choose if they come or stay in a stay home in a Zoom meeting. Yep. Yes, we don't impose one or the other. Okay. This is not a formal request, but the money that's unspent, we've had other projects to travel in Canada for us, for the committee to move to visit the community. Is it the same budget? That's an excellent question. It comes out of the committee's overall budget. No, but I want to make everyone here aware. We've had projects and plans in the past, but we haven't done it since I'm here. But I haven't traveled for this committee in a long time. We have committees that actually travel abroad to see, in the field, on the ground, what's happening. I'd like to know if we have a possibility of that kind. Any other comments? Was the committee prepared to adopt the motions for these budgets? Good. Thank you. Now, documents that were received during the course of our study on this topic, last fall, the committee sent a questionnaire to all the official language minority communities in Canada. French, we received a memo or a brief from the Minister of Education from the TNO, Northwest Territories, but we were unable to distribute a document before prorogation. Given the prorogation, before the list could be sent, these documents are not considered having been, they're not deemed received by the committee. So does the committee wish that we distribute these documents now and use it in developing this study? I agree, but I have a question. We had requested that the provincial governments submit information on the financing that they grant to these language minority schools. Did we receive anything? And if not, could we once again request of the provinces to provide that information? Well, we only got one response. Well, could we send them a gentle reminder, perhaps, that the other provinces should, in fact, be sending us some? Well, it's up to the committee to decide. Well, I agree that we can use those documents that failed the time limit, but I think we should remind the provinces that we want their data.
Are we voting on that? Because I have another question for the committee. Personally, I think my conservative colleagues are okay with the proposal. As the Liberal colleague has just said, we can renew. It doesn't cost anything. But I will have my opportunity to speak. I'll come back to you, Mr. Chair. Do we receive the documents? Do we distribute them? Are we in agreement with that? Now, Mr. Beaulieu proposes that we resend the request to the provincial and territorial governments. Do we agree with that proposal? Yes, thank you. Mr. Godin, you have the floor now. Mr. Chair, I would like to find out how many school boards. You talked about 14. How many responded? How many did not respond? Looking at the statistics, is this very representative or not? If we have 200 and only 14 responses, is that a lot? If it's 30 out of 4, well, we just need to know the figures. I'll ask the clerk. On my Excel sheet, we sent out 38. Quebec English School Boards Association. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Il est pas ouvert, là.
Taille à l'autre, ouais.
Taille à l'autre, apparemment. Il fonctionne pas?
Oui, en tout cas. Alors, effectivement, donc...
What happened was that in some provinces like Ontario, with lots of school boards, Catholic school board, public school board, they have associations. So the committee sent it to the school boards as well as to those associations and groups. So even though we received responses only from 11 school boards, that's interesting because we have Alberta, Ontario. There's good representation even from the territories overall, which is a good thing. Now, for Anglophone school boards in Quebec, one responded to the survey, to the questionnaire. Mr. Godin? Next week, I will be at the Federation of Francophone School Boards Convention. Is it possible for us to be able to maybe try to find out if they can participate.
Du comité.
Donc, M. Godin, est-ce que vous demandez que...
Are you asking the clerk to follow up? What I'm asking, Mr. Chair, is that I be able to receive the list of organizations or school boards that did not respond so that I can strongly suggest to them or encourage them to respond to the questionnaire so that we can have more exhaustive responses.
Est-ce que tu veux expliquer peut-être ça? Tu veux que je l'explique?
Oui, à travers le président.
Through the chair, what I would like to add is that the committee has just accepted to receive the questionnaires that were submitted already. The deadline was the 31st of December 2024. Those we received had to do with the situation till end of December 2024. If we open up the invitations to school boards who did not respond, then we'll be receiving data that will be different. And these will make it difficult to have comparable data, which was the initial objective. So that's our consideration. It's up to you to decide. I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Madam Jeanette? In light of what you've said, if we reopen this, what impact would it have when it comes to the deadline? So what impact will it have on our planning? It's up to the committee to set up a deadline if we want to reopen the invitations. The study will go on till the beginning of November, so we need to act fast. We can set a date. Another possibility is that those school boards could submit briefs as part of the study. So if you meet them, you can always encourage them to send us written briefs that will be taken into account during our study and report. Mr. Bolio. So they were supposed to have been sent by 2024. The deadline we had said was the 31st of December 2024. That's why I wasn't able to reopen them after the prorogation. Otherwise, it would include from this December to today. We could always resend the invitations. I'm looking at the time. Mr. Godin, I am aware of the situation. My proposal is that if it's possible to contact the school boards that responded to the questionnaires, well, I will not be reaching out to them to send briefs. They could simply draw on the briefs on the questionnaires. If we want to change the deadline, I wonder if it takes a lot of work on your part. If that's the case, then we can let it go. Maybe we can simply make a few amendments. For those who have already submitted their responses, if they want to make any changes from the last time that was covered, they could do so. Well, but if it's problematic, we could let it go. Madam Jeanette, I think we can make the proposal aware of the challenges. We could ask them to simply submit the list of those who responded, those who did not respond, and then if we meet those who did not respond, we encourage them to send a brief. Do we agree with Madame Jeanette's proposal? Mr. Godin, what I will add is that if the school boards who have already responded want to send an update in the form of a brief, they can do so. Any other comments? We agree with that? Is that okay? Is that all? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.